The house key trembled in my hand as I stood facing the front door. 3 days in the hospital had felt like 3 years, and all I wanted was to collapse into my own bed, wrapped in the familiar scent of home. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the porch, and in the distance, a dog barked. I turned the key slowly, not wanting to wake anyone if they were napping. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside, my hospital bag brushing softly against my leg. The house felt different, warmer, more alive than when I had left it. Voices drifted down from upstairs, low and intimate, followed by the unmistakable sound of laughter. My heart started to beat faster, but not with joy. The wooden stairs groaned under my weight as I ascended toward our bedroom. Each step resonated in the silence like a countdown. Reaching the landing, I paused. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, I could see movement, shadows dancing on the wall. I pushed the door open. What I saw in that moment would torment me for the rest of my life, but it would also become the catalyst for the most elaborate revenge I could ever have imagined. Before we continue, please write in the comment what country you are viewing this video from. We love to know where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic real-life revenge guest stories. Enjoy the listening. 3 weeks earlier, the accident had been sudden and brutal. One moment, I was driving home from my book club meeting, thinking about the gourmet tacos I was going to pick up for dinner. The next, I was waking up in a hospital bed with IVs in my arms, and a pounding headache that made me nauseous. Jessica, Dr. Clark said, pulling a chair close to my bed. You were very lucky. The drunk driver who hit you walked away unharmed, but you suffered a severe concussion and some internal bruising. We're going to keep you here for observation, probably 3 to 4 days. 4 days? I had never been away from home that long, not since my wedding 5 years ago. My husband, David, had been by my side when I woke up, holding my hand, and whispering sweet things about how scared he had been when he got the call. I don't know what I'd do without you, Jessica, he had said, his green eyes shimmering with unshed tears. You're everything to me. I squeezed his hand, feeling silly for the warmth that spread through my chest. After 5 years of marriage, after all the little arguments over dirty dishes, and whose turn it was to take out the trash, it was comforting to know he still loved me so deeply. David visited me every day. Why? Bringing flowers, magazines, and news from work. He was a financial advisor at a small firm downtown, and his clients adored him. He had that natural charm that made everyone feel like his best friend within minutes of meeting him. How is Mrs. Peterson? I asked on the second day, referring to his elderly client, who had become a sort of adopted grandmother to us both. Oh, she's doing well. She keeps asking about you. In fact, she wants to bring you some of her famous sugar cookies when you get out. And the Johnsons are still worried about their retirement fund. David's smile faltered for an instant. Yeah, they're fine too. Don't worry about work stuff, Jessica. Just focus on recovering. On the third day, my sister Cynthia came to visit. She lived 2 hours away, and had driven down as soon as she heard about the accident. We had always been close despite being polar opposites. Where I was cautious and thoughtful, Cynthia was impulsive and blunt. Where I preferred quiet nights at home with a book, she thrived on nightlife and adventure. You look like hell, she said, collapsing into the visitor's chair with her usual lack of filter. Thanks. That's exactly what every recovering accident victim wants to hear. She grinned and pulled a box of chocolates from her enormous purse. They're from that fancy downtown pastry shop. I figured the hospital food couldn't be worse, but just in case. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. Cynthia told me about her latest dating disaster, a guy who showed up for their coffee date wearing a t-shirt that read, "World's Okay Lover." I updated her on the neighborhood drama she had missed. Mrs. Davies caught someone going through her recycling bin again, I said, unwrapping one of the chocolates. She's convinced it's part of an elaborate identity theft ring. Or maybe she throws out really good stuff, Cynthia suggested. Remember when we found that vintage jewelry box in old Mrs. Adams' trash when we were kids? The memory made me laugh, which sent a jolt of pain through my ribs. Cynthia's expression immediately shifted to one of concern. Are you okay? I'll call the nurse. No, I'm fine, just still sore. I carefully adjusted myself. The doctor says I might be released tomorrow if my latest CT scan looks good. That's great. David must be thrilled to have you home. Something in her tone made me look at her more closely. What do you mean? Nothing. Just you know how men are when they have to fend for themselves. He's probably living off cereal and takeout. She was right, of course. David was many things, but domestic wasn't one of them. He often joked he would starve if left alone for more than a few days. That night, after Cynthia headed back to her hotel, I called David to let him know I might be coming home a day early. The phone rang 4 times before jumping to voicemail. Hi, you've reached David Miller. I can't get to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll call you back as soon as possible. I left a message asking him to call me back, and then I tried again an hour later. Still, no answer. It wasn't unusual for him to miss calls. He often forgot to charge his cell phone, or left it in another room. But something about the silence tonight felt different. Maybe it was that pain medication making me paranoid. Or maybe it was the way he had seemed distracted during his visit that morning. The next morning, Dr. Clark walked in with my test results and a smile. Everything looks good, Jessica. You are cleared to go home, but I want you to take it easy for the next week. No driving, no heavy lifting, and if you experience dizziness or nausea, call us immediately. I thanked her and gathered my few belongings, eager to get back to normal life. The hospital had treated me well, but there was nothing like sleeping in your own bed. The taxi ride home took 20 minutes through familiar streets, lined with orange trees and manicured lawns. It was a beautiful, planned community, the kind of neighborhood where people still waved and asked to borrow a cup of sugar. David and I had bought our house here 3 years ago. A modest 2-story ranch with blue shutters, and a small garden I had spent countless weekends perfecting. As we pulled into the driveway, I noticed David's car was gone. He was probably at work, which was fine. I had my keys, and honestly, I was looking forward to an hour or 2 of quiet time alone before he got home. I paid the cab driver, and slowly climbed the front steps, my ribs still itching with every breath. The house key felt heavy in my hand, and I fumbled with it for a moment before managing to unlock the door. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was different. The house smelled like vanilla candles, which was odd because I never bought vanilla candles. I preferred lavender or eucalyptus. There was something else, too, a perfume I didn't recognize, something floral and expensive. I set my hospital bag down in the entryway and listened. The house was not empty. There were voices coming from upstairs, muffled, but definitely there. A woman's laughter, light and musical, followed by David's deeper chuckle. My first thought was that maybe Cynthia had come back to surprise me, and David had come home early from work to welcome me. But Cynthia's laugh was loud and boisterous, nothing like the delicate sound I had just heard. I moved slowly up the stairs, each step sending a dull ache through my injured ribs. The voices were coming from our master bedroom, and as I got closer, I could distinguish words. "E probably should get dressed soon," the woman was saying. "She might call." "Relax," David responded, his voice lazy and satisfied. "She's not released until tomorrow. We have all night." I stopped breathing. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I could see our bed. The bed David and I had picked out together. The bed where we had made love on our wedding night. The bed where I had cried on his shoulder when my father died last year. David was there, his back to the door, and beneath him was a woman with long copper hair and porcelain skin. She was beautiful in a way that tightened my chest, the kind of beauty that belonged in magazines and movies, not in the bedrooms of middle-class ranch homes with middle-class husbands. They were moving together in a rhythm I recognized, a rhythm that belonged to me and David, and the woman was making soft sounds, of pleasure that sliced through me like broken glass. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching my marriage dissolve before my eyes. The woman's hands ran through David's hair the same way I did, and she whispered things I couldn't quite hear, but could feel in the way he responded to her touch. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a drunken mistake. This was intimate and familiar, the kind of intimacy that comes from knowing someone's body, from having done this many times before. How long had this been going on? The woman turned her head slightly, and for one terrifying moment, I thought she might see me, but her eyes were closed, lost in the moment, and David was too focused on her to notice anything else. I backed away from the door on shaky legs, my heart hammering so loud I was sure they would hear it. I reached the top of the stairs before my knees gave way, and I had to grab the railing to keep from falling. Everything he thought I knew about my life, about my marriage, about David, it had just shattered. The man I had trusted with my heart, the man who had held my hand in the hospital and told me he couldn't live without me, was upstairs making love to another woman in our bed. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of the house before they came downstairs, before I had to face the reality of what I had just witnessed. But where could I go? My car was still in the shop being repaired after the accident, and I couldn't exactly call a taxi and explain that I was fleeing my own house because my husband was cheating on me. I was trapped. The smart thing would have been to go back up those stairs and confront them both, to demand answers, to scream and cry, and let all my rage and heartbreak spill out in one explosive moment. But I didn't do that. Instead, I crept down the stairs and slipped out the front door, closing it as silently as I could. I walked to the end of the driveway and sat down on the curb, mule body shaking. The evening sun was warm on my face, and the neighborhood was at peace. Mrs. Davies was watering her flowers across the street, and somewhere a lawn-mower was running. It was such an ordinary day, and yet my entire world had just collapsed. I sat there for 20 minutes trying to process what I had seen and what it meant. My marriage was over. That much was clear. But there were so many questions rushing through my mind that I couldn't focus on anyone for long. Who is she? How did they meet? How long has this been going on? Did he love her? Was he planning to leave me for her? And then cutting through all the other questions, like a knife came the one that hurt the most. What was wrong with me? That she had that I didn't. I was still sitting on the curb 10 minutes later, when she emerged, kissed David goodbye on the porch and drove away in her car. David stood in the doorway watching her leave, a look of satisfied contentment on his face that I had never seen on him before. He looked happy, happier than I had seen him in months. I waited until he went back inside before standing up and brushing off my jeans. My legs were still trembling and my ribs ached from sitting on the hard concrete, but now I felt strangely calm. The initial shock was wearing off and something else was taking its place. Something cold, calculated, and infinitely more dangerous than the pain and confusion I had felt before. I walked back up the driveway and into my own house. David, I called out, keeping my voice light and normal. I'm home. He appeared at the top of the stairs, and for an instant I saw panic cross his face, before he covered it with a smile. Jessica, you're back early. I thought they were keeping you until tomorrow. The doctor said I could come home today. Surprise. I forced myself to smile back, though I felt like my face might crack from the effort. He came down the stairs and gave me a hug, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from screaming. He smelled of sex and her perfume, and when he kissed me on the forehead, I could taste the lie on his lips. How are you feeling? He asked, his voice filled with concern that I now knew was fake. Tired but happy to be home. This house felt so empty without you. If he caught the irony in my words, he didn't show it. I'll order us some dinner, he offered. Gourmet tacos from that place you like. That sounds perfect. I watched him move around the kitchen, opening takeout menus and talking about his day at work, and I marveled at the ease with which he could lie. He was telling me about a client meeting that probably never happened, about how much he had missed me while I was away, about how excited he was to have me home. It was all a performance, and he was very, very good at it. We ate at dinner sitting across from each other at the small dining table, making polite conversation about my recovery and his job. He asked about my sister's visit, and I told him about the chocolates and Mrs. Davies. Recycling thief. That woman is paranoid, he said, laughing. Remember when she thought the mailman was reading her magazines? Maybe he was. Maybe everyone in this neighborhood has secrets we don't know about. Something flickered in his expression, but he recovered quickly. Speaking of secrets, I bought you something while you were in the hospital. A welcome home gift. He disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a small wrapped box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with my birthstone at the center. David, it's beautiful. You didn't have to. You wanted to. I got so scared when you had the accident, Jessica. It made me realize how much you mean to me. The bracelet was lovely, and under normal circumstances, I would have been touched by the gesture. But now, all I could think about was whether he had bought it or after he started sleeping with her. Was this a gift born of love or guilt? Put it on me, I asked, extending my wrist. His fingers were gentle as he clasped the closure, and for a moment, I almost forgot what I had seen upstairs. This was the David I had fallen in love with. The David who brought me flowers for no reason and remembered how I liked my coffee. But that ID was gone, if he had ever existed at all. That night we slept together for the first time since my accident. David was tender and careful, mindful of my injuries, and if I hadn't known about her, I might have thought it was one of the most romantic nights we'd had in months, but I did know about her, and every kiss, every touch, every whispered endearment felt like a betrayal. When he fell asleep beside me, a protective arm draped over my waist, I lay staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to do next. I could confront him. I see. Old demand an explanation, threaten divorce, make him choose between us, but something told me that wouldn't be enough. He had lied so easily. He had played the role of loving husband so convincingly that I couldn't trust anything he might say in his defense. No, if I was going to end Thai's marriage, I would do it on my own terms. I was going to find out everything there was to know about David's affair, and then I was going to destroy him in a way he would never recover from. The next morning, David left for work at his usual time, kissing me goodbye and reminding me to call if I needed anything. I waited until his sub was out of sight, before getting up and making myself a coffee. My first instinct was to search the house, look for evidence of the affair, but I was smarter than that. If David was clever enough to maintain a relationship for what seemed like months without my suspicion, he was probably clever enough not to leave obvious clues lying around. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, and began listing everything I knew. The woman was young, probably mid-202 with copper hair and expensive taste in clothing. She had a key to our house, meaning this wasn't a casual fling. They were serious enough that he had given her access to our most private space. She drove a red sedan, though I hadn't gotten the license plate number. Most importantly, she and David had been together while I was in the hospital. They had made plans to spend the night together, suggesting they were in regular communication and comfortable with extended periods of time together. This wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. I needed to find out who she was, but I couldn't hire a private investigator without risking David finding out. I needed to be smart about this, gathering information slowly and carefully. My first stop was David's home office. It was a small room off the living room that he used for client files and paperwork. I had always respected his privacy and rarely went in there, but desperate times called for desperate measures. His computer was password protected, but I knew David well enough to guess his passwords. He wasn't very creative about security. He used some variation of his birthday, or anniversary, or our dog's name for everything. It took 3 tries to get into his laptop. The password was Jessica0515, our wedding date. The irony was not lost on me. His email was clean. At least his main work account was. But when I checked his browsing history, I found something interesting. He had been citing a lot of real estate portals lately, looking at condos and apartments downtown. Was he planning to leave me, or was he looking for a place for her? I dug deeper into his browsing history, and found something even more disturbing. He had been researching divorce law, specifically how assets were divided in our state and whether adultery affect alimony. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through page after page of legal website. David wasn't just cheating on me, he was planning to leave me, and he was making sure he understood the financial implications before he did it. I printed several of the pages he had visited, and tucked them away in a book. Then I cleared the printer history and the browser cache. If he was going to spy on me through his research, I could spy back, but I needed more than just web browsing history. I needed to know who she was and how they met. That afternoon, I called David's office. Miller Financial Services, Linda speaking. How can I help you? Linda was David's secretary, a sweet older woman who had been with the firm for 15 years. She had always been kind to me at office parties and client events. Hi, Linda. It's Jessica Miller. Is David available? Oh, hi Jessica. How are you feeling? David told us all about your accident. We've been so worried. I'm much better, thank you. I was actually hoping to surprise David with lunch today, but I can't remember his schedule. Does he have any client meetings this afternoon? Let me check. He has one at 2 with the Martinez, but he should be free around 3:30 if you wanted to drop by then. Perfect. He's been so busy while I was in the hospital. I know he hates it when I'm not around to keep his schedule organized. Linda laughed. Oh, David, he's been as charming as ever, but I think he's been a little distracted. In fact, we had a new client in last week, a young woman setting up her own business. She's been in several times for consultations. My pulse quickened. Oh, that's nice. Always good to have young people thinking about their financial future. Absolutely. And she's lovely, very professional. I think her name is Vanessa something. Vanessa Blake, that's it. She owns that new boutique on Elm Street. Vanessa Blake, I finally had a name. Well, I should let you get back to work. I'll see you later this afternoon. I look forward to seeing you, dear. Take care. I hung up the phone and immediately searched for Vanessa Blake online. Her boutique, Blake's Boutique, had a website with photos of the interior and some of the clothing lines they carried. It was high-end, the kind of place that sold $150 scarves and designer handbags. The About Us page had a photo of Vanessa, the same woman I had seen in my bedroom, standing in front of the shop with a radiant smile. The bio described her as a local entrepreneur, with a passion for bringing high-end fashion to our community. She was 26, a college graduate with a business degree. And she had opened the boutique 6 months ago. 6 months, right around the time David had started working late more often. I spent the next hour researching everything I could find about Vanessa Blake. Her business license was public record, and I found her home address through T. He County Assessor's site. She lived in an expensive downtown condo complex, the kind that had concierges and valet parking. How could a struggling 26-year-old boutique owner afford a place like that? New businesses usually struggled for the first few years, especially retail and small markets, unless she had help, financial help. The more I learned about Vanessa Blake, the angrier I became. She wasn't just sleeping with my husband. She was using him, using his expertise to build her business, using his contacts to meet potential clients, and likely using his money to maintain her expensive lifestyle. David wasn't just betraying our marriage. He was being manipulated by a woman who saw him as a stepping stone to the life she wanted. But anger, I was finding, could be a very useful emotion when properly channeled. I drove downtown that afternoon, parking across the street from Blake's boutique. Through the large windows, I could see Vanessa moving inside, arranging clothes, and helping customers. She was even more beautiful in person than she had been in our bedroom. She moved with confidence and grace, and every customer seemed delighted by her attention. I watched her for an hour, studying her gestures, her body language, the way she interacted with different types of people. She was smart. I'd give her that, and manipulative in a way that probably came naturally. At 5, she locked up the shop and walked toward the parking garage next door. A few minutes later, the red sedan appeared, and I followed her through the downtown traffic. She didn't go to her expensive condo. Instead, she drove to a small coffee shop on the other side of town. The kind of place where college students gathered to study and write poetry. Inside, she met a man I didn't recognize, older, probably in his 50s, dressed in an expensive suit. They sat at a corner table, and their conversation seemed intense and professional. Were there other men? Was David just one of several sugar daddies financing Vanessa Blake's lifestyle? I took photos with my cell phone, making sure I got clear shots of both Vanessa and her companion. I didn't know who he was yet, but I had a feeling he was going to be important to the story I was piecing together. When David got home that night, I was waiting in the kitchen with dinner already on the table. "This smells incredible," he said, loosening his tie. "What's the occasion?" "Do I need an occasion to cook for my husband?" He smiled and sat down across from me. "How was your day? Did you rest like the doctor ordered?" "Mostly. I drove to the bookstore this afternoon." I know. The doctor said no driving, but I was going stir crazy." "Jessica, you have to be more careful. What if you had gotten dizzy behind the wheel?" His concern sounded genuine, and for a moment, I almost felt guilty about lying to him. But then I remembered Vanessa Blake's hands in his hair and the guilt evaporated. "You're right. I'll be more careful. How was your day? Linda mentioned you had some new clients this week." Something flickered in his expression so fast I almost missed it. "Yeah, a few new clients. Business has been picking up actually." "That's wonderful. Anyone interesting?" "Not particularly. Just the usual people looking for retirement planning, investment advice. Nothing too exciting." He was lying so smoothly that I almost admired his skill. If I hadn't known about Vanessa, I would never have suspected he was being less than completely honest. "I was thinking," I said carefully, "maybe we should start planning our future, too. We've been married 5 years, and he never really talked seriously about long-term goals. Like what?" "I don't know. Kids, maybe a bigger house. You know, the things married couples usually want." David's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Kids, we've talked about this before. I know, said we'd wait until we were more financially stable, but your business is doing so well now. Jessica, I don't think this is the right time to make huge decisions. You just got out of the hospital. You should focus on recovering, but when will be the right time? We aren't getting any younger. David put down his fork and reached across the table to take my hand. Let's talk about this in a few weeks, okay? When you feel completely recovered? In other words, let's talk about it after I figured out how to divorce you without losing too much money. I squeezed his hand and smiled. Of course, you're probably right. But inside, I was already planning my next move. Over the next week, I developed a routine. David would leave for work and I would begin my investigation. I followed Vanessa to her boutique, to business lunches with potential investors, to her expensive apartment building. I learned her schedule, her habits, her weaknesses. But the more I observed her, the more questions I had. Vanessa Blake was living far beyond the means of a struggling boutique owner. Even with David's help, her apartment rent alone was $3,500 a month, and her car was leased, not financed. She wore different designer outfits every day, and she got her hair done at the city's most expensive salon twice a week. Either David was giving her far more money than a financial advisor should have access to, or there was another source of income I hadn't uncovered yet. The answer came on Thursday afternoon, when I followed Vanessa to a lunch meeting at the city's most exclusive restaurant. She was meeting the same older man I had seen with her at the coffee shop, but this time their interaction seemed more personal. I managed to secure a table across the restaurant where I could observe without being noticed. They held hands across the table, and he kissed her when she got up to go to the restroom. This was not a business meeting. This was a date. Vanessa Blake wasn't just cheating on me with my husband. She was cheating on both of them with somebody else. I took more photos and managed to overhear enough of their conversation to learn the man's name was Richard something. He mentioned his wife several times, complaining about her spending habits and her suspicion about his business trips. When they left the restaurant, I followed Richard to the parking garage and got his license plate number. It took some creative online searching, but I eventually identified him as Richard Hawthorne, a prominent local businessman who owned several car dealerships throughout the state. Richard Hawthorne was married, extremely wealthy, and apparently financing Vanessa Blake's lifestyle while she maintained simultaneous affairs with him and my husband. The web of deceit was even more complicated than I had imagined, and I still wasn't sure how I could leverage this information, but I knew it was important. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I called my sister, Cynthia. Jessica, how are you feeling? I've been worried about you since I left. I need to ask you a favor. A big one. Of course. What do you need? I took a deep breath. I need you to help me catch David cheating. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought she might have hung up. Jessica, what are you talking about? I told her everything about coming home early from hospital, about what I had seen in our bedroom, about Vanessa Blake and Richard Hawthorne, and all the lies David had been telling me. Oh my God, Cynthia said when I finished. Jessica, yeah, I'm so sorry. What do you want to do? I want to destroy him. Okay, I get that, but what's the plan? You want me to help you confront him? No, I don't want to be messy about this. I want to gather enough evidence so that when I divorce him, he can't lie his way out of it, and I want him to lose everything he cares about. Cynthia was silent for a moment. That sounds intense. Are you sure you're thinking clearly? You just got out of the hospital, and this is a massive shock. I'm thinking clearer than I have in months. David has been lying to me about everything, Cynthia. Our marriage, our future, probably our finances. I need to know the full extent of his deceit before I make any decisions. What do you need me to do? I need you to help me break into his office after hours. I think there are things on his work computer that aren't on his home. 1. Financial records. Maybe emails he thinks are secure. Jessica, that's breaking and entering. It's my husband's office. I have a right to know if he's stealing from our marriage to finance his girlfriend's boutique. Another long pause. David is going to a conference in Atlanta this weekend. At least that he told me. It's probably just a cover so he can spend the weekend with Vanessa, but either way, he'll be gone for 2 days. I'll drive down Friday night. Thank you, Cynthia. I know this is crazy, but I need to know the truth. I love you, Jessica. We'll figure this out together. After hanging up, I felt calmer than I had since discovering the affair. Having a plan, having someone on my side made the whole situation feel more manageable. On Friday evening, David packed a small suitcase and kissed him goodbye. "I'll call you when I get to the hotel," he said. "Take care of yourself while I'm gone." "I will. Have a good conference. I love you, Jessica." He said it so easily, so naturally that for a moment I almost believed him, but then I thought of Vanessa Blake's hands on his body and the illusion shattered. "I love you too." 2 hours after David left, Cynthia arrived with a bottle of wine and a grim expression. "I still think this is crazy," she said, pulling me into a hug. "But here I am." We spent the evening going over the plan. David's office building had basic security keycard access and a security guard who made rounds every few hours. But the building also housed several other small businesses, including an accounting firm that worked late during tax season and a law office that often had evening appointments. I had David's access card. He had given me one years ago in case of emergencies, and I had never thought to return it. "What if we get caught?" Cynthia asked, refilling her wine glass. "We won't. And even if we did, what are they going to do? I'm his wife. I have legal access to his financial records." "Do you really?" "I mean, legally, I don't know, and I don't care. I need to see what he's hiding." At 10 o'clock, we drove downtown to David's building. The parking garage was mostly empty, save for a few late-working cars. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor, and I used David's card to swipe us into the office suite. Miller Financial Services was dark and silent. I led Cynthia through the waiting room to David's private office, my heart pounding with adrenaline and fear. His computer was locked, but I knew his passwords. Within minutes, I was going through his files. What I found was worse than I had imagined. David hadn't just been having an affair with Vanessa Blake. He had been embezzling money from his clients to finance her business. The evidence was all there in spreadsheets and bank transfers. He had been skimming smelums from several different accounts over the last 6 months, moving the money through a series of shell corporations before it ended up in accounts belonging to Blake's boutique. "Holy hell," Cynthia whispered, looking over my shoulder at the screen. "How much money are we talking about?" I did a quick tally. At least $200,000, maybe more. "Jessica, this isn't just adultery. This is a felony embezzlement. He could go to jail for this." I printed the most incriminating documents, my hands shaking with rage. David hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He had betrayed his clients, people who trusted him with their life savings and retirement funds. "Look at this," I said, pointing to one of the accounts. "This is Mrs. Peterson. She's 78 years old. David has been her advisor for 3 years. She trusts him completely." Cynthia leaned in to read the screen. "He took $15,000 out of her account. Over 4 months, smellaments she probably wouldn't notice right away." I checked more files. The Johnsons lost $12,000. The Bales, $8,000. He had been systematically stealing from people who looked at him like family. The full extent of David's crimes was becoming clear, and with it came a cold, calculating anger that surprised me with its intensity. This wasn't just about our marriage anymore. This was about justice for all the people he had hurt. "We need to copy everything," I said, plugging a USB drive into his computer. "Every document, every spreadsheet, every email." "What are you going to do with it?" "I'm going to make sure he pays for what's done. All of it." We spent 2 hours going through David's files. The deeper we dug, the worse it got. He had been stealing from clients for almost a year, not just 6 months. The total amount was closer to $450,000, and some of the victims were people who could barely afford the losses. But the most shocking discovery came when I opened his draft email folder. There was a message addressed to Vanessa Blake dated 3 days earlier that he had apparently written but never sent. I can't keep this up much longer. Jessica's starting to suspect, and the audit at work is scheduled for next month. I think we need to move up our timeline. The divorce papers are ready, and if he moved most of our joint assets into the offshore account we discussed, we should be able to disappear to buys by the end of the month if everything goes according to plan. "I love you." I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. David wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning to steal our community property and flee the country with Vanessa Blake. "Cynthia, look at this." She read the email over my shoulder, her face paling. "Jessica, you have to call the police right now." Not yet. I need more evidence and I need to make sure Vanessa doesn't disappear before I can expose them both. This is getting dangerous. What if they figure out? What if they try to leave earlier than planned? I was already thinking 3 steps ahead. They won't. David thinks I'm the same trusting wife as always. He has no idea I figured any of this out. I copied the draft email and several others that detailed David and Vanessa's plans. They had been communicating through a private email account he had hidden from me, planning every detail of their escape. Vanessa Blake wasn't just a manipulative gold digger. She was a criminal accomplice. She had known about the embezzlement from the start and had helped David plan how to cover their tracks. By the time we left David's office, I had evidence to destroy them both, but I wasn't ready to hand it over to the police yet. I wanted to enact my own form of justice first. What's the plan now? Cynthia asked as we drove back home. I'm going to give them exactly what they want. What do you mean? I turned to look at her, and she actually flinched at whatever she saw in my expression. I'm going to help them disappear. David returned from his conference on Sunday evening with a guilty smile and a small gift, a bottle of expensive perfume that I was sure Vanessa had helped him pick out. How was the conference? I asked, accepting his kiss and trying not to flinch away from his touch. Mostly boring. Lots of presentations on new tax regulations and investment strategies, but I learned a few things that might help our clients. Our clients, the same clients he had been systematically robbing for months. I missed you, he said, pulling me into Og. The hotel was nice, but it's not the same as sleeping next to you. I missed you too. The lie came so easily. I was becoming as good at deception as he was. Over the next few days, I set my plan into motion. The first step was to establish my own financial safety net. I opened a new bank account at Otif Rent Bank under my maiden name using my birth certificate and an old utility bill from before we were married. I transferred a small amount of money from our joint savings, not enough for David to notice, but enough to give him options if things went wrong. The second step was to gather more evidence about Vanessa's other relationships. I spent Tuesday following her other lunch date with Richard Hawthorne, and this time I was prepared. I had borrowed Cynthia's camera with a telephoto lens and managed to get dozens of photos of Vanessa and Richard together. They were clearly intimate, kissing, holding hands, gazing into each other's eyes like smitten teenagers. But the most interesting photos came when they left the restaurant together and went to a nearby hotel. I waited in the lobby, pretending to read a magazine until they came down 2 hours later. Richard kissed Vanessa goodbye and slipped her an envelope before they parted. I followed Vanessa to her car and watched her open the envelope. Even from a distance, I could see it was stuffed with cash. Richard Hawthorne wasn't just having an affair with Vanessa Blake, he was paying for it. That night, I made another discovery that changed everything. David was working late again, or so he claimed, and I decided to do some more digging into Vanessa's background. I had been so focused on her current activities that I hadn't looked much into her past. What I found was fascinating. Vanessa Blake was not her real name. She had been born Valerie Smith in California and had a criminal record 3 arrests for scamming and identity theft, though she had only been convicted once and had served probation instead of jail time. She had moved to our state 2 years ago, right around the time she had legally changed her name to Vanessa Blake. The boutique was not her first business. She had run several other companies that had failed under suspicious circumstances. Vanessa Blake was a professional con artist, and David was just her latest mark. But this is where my plan got truly interesting. Vanessa didn't know I knew any of this. She thought she was playing both David and Richard, keeping them isolated from each other while she bled them both dry. What she didn't realize was that I was about to introduce them. On Wednesday evening, I called Richard Hawthorne's office. Hawthorne Autos. Linda speaking. How can I help you? Hello, I'm calling about Mr. Hawthorne's appointment tomorrow. I'm from Blake's boutique and we need to reschedule. Let me check his schedule. I don't see any appointments scheduled with Blake's boutique. Perfect. That meant Vanessa was keeping her meetings with Richard a secret from his secretary, suggesting they were being very careful about their affair. I'm sorry. It might be a personal appointment. Could you give me his direct line, so I can call him myself? I can't give out his personal number, but I can take a message if you like. That's all right. I'll find another way. Thank you. I hung up and immediately called David's office. Miller Financial Services. Linda speaking. Hi, Linda. It's Jessica. Is David available? He's with a client right now, dear. Would you like me to have him call you back? Actually, I was wondering if you could help me with something. I'm trying to plan a surprise party for David's birthday next month, and I wanted to invite some of his newer clients. Didn't you mention he had a client who owns a boutique? I thought she might be fun to include. Oh, you mean Vanessa Blake? What a sweet idea. She's lovely and I think she'd enjoy meeting David's wife. Let me look up her information for you. Linda gave me Vanessa's phone number and email address, both of which I already had. But more importantly, she confirmed that Vanessa had been coming to David's office regularly for financial consultations. The pieces of my revenge are falling into place. On Thursday afternoon, I made 2 phone calls that would set everything in motion. The first call was to Richard Hawthorne's personal cell phone, which I had gotten by calling his dealership and pretending to be a customer with an urgent warranty question. Richard speaking. Mr. Hawthorne, my name is Jessica Miller. I believe you know my husband, David Miller. There was a long pause. I don't recognize the name. Really? That's odd, 'cause he's been having an affair with the same woman. You are Vanessa Blake. The silence lasted even longer this time. I think you have the wrong number. Vanessa Blake, also known as Valerie Smith, copper hair, green eyes, drives a red Toyota Camry. She owns Blake's Teak on Elm Street, though I'm sure you know that already since you've been financing it. What do you want? His voice had gone cold and dangerous, but I wasn't intimidated. I want to meet you tomorrow at 2 at the coffee shop on Elm Street. Come alone. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'm going to call your wife and tell her about your afternoon visits to the hotel. I have pictures, Mr. Hawthorne. Very detailed pictures. He hung up without saying goodbye, but I knew he would be there. The second call was to David. Jessica, is everything all right? I'm fine. But I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come home early today? What's wrong? You sound worried. I'll explain when you get here. It's about us, David. About our future. I could hear the concern in his voice, as he agreed to leave work immediately. David arrived home 20 minutes later, his face tight with worry. What's going on, Jess? You're scaring me. I was waiting for him in the living room, sitting in the armchair that faced the front door. I had positioned myself so the afternoon light was behind me, leaving my face in shadows. I know, David. Know what? I know about Vanessa Blake. I know about the money you've been stealing from your clients. I know about your plans to leave the country. The color drained from his face so quickly, I thought he might pass out. Jessica, I can explain. No, you can't. There is no explanation that makes any of this acceptable. He slumped onto the couch across from me, his hands shaking. How long have you known? Since the day I came home from the hospital. I saw you 2 together in her bed. David covered his face with his hands. Oh God, Jessica, I am so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. Which part? The affair or the embezzlement? He snapped his head up. You know about the clients. I know everything. The offshore accounts, the fake IDs you've been looking into, the house you've been looking at in buys. David stared at me as if I were a stranger. What are you going to do? That depends on you. What do you mean? I leaned forward, keeping my voice quiet and steady. I'm going to give you accolades, David. You can do the right thing. Turn yourself into the police, confess your crimes, return the money you stole, and face the consequences like a man. Or you can go ahead with your original plan, disappear with Vanessa, start your new life in buys, and hope I never find you. He was looking at me like I had lost my mind. You're not serious. I'm completely serious. But if you choose option 2, you should know that Vanessa Blake is not who you think she is. I slid a manila envelope across the coffee table toward him. Her real name is Valerie Smith, and she's a convicted felon. She's also taking money from at least one other man, Richard Hawthorne, married, wealthy, and completely infatuated with her. David ripped the envelope open with shaking hands. Inside were copies of Vanessa's criminal record, photos of her with Richard, and bank statements showing deposits from multiple sources. She's been using you, David, just like she's using Richard, just like she's probably used dozens of other men. You are not special to her. You are just another mark in a long list of marks. David stared at the pictures, his face running through a dozen different emotions. This can't be true. She loves me. We're building a life together. The life you're building is based on money you stole from innocent people. And the woman you're building it with is a professional con artist, who will disappear the moment she finds a better target. You're lying to me. I am Call her right now. Tell her you want to move up the timeline, you want to leave for buys this weekend. See how fast she comes up with excuses. David pulled out his phone, his hand still trembling, dialed Vanessa's number and put her on speaker. David, is everything okay? You sound funny. I need to see you tonight. It's important. I can't tonight, darling. I have a business dinner with a potential investor. What about tomorrow, Vanessa? I think we need to move up our timeline, leave for buys this weekend instead of next month. There was a long pause. David, we've talked about this. The timing has to be perfect. We can't rush these things or we'll make mistakes. But I love you. Don't you want to start our new life together? Of course I do, but we have to be smart. Look, I really can't talk right now. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? She hung up before David could respond. David stared at the phone, then at me, then at photos scattered across the coffee table. She's with him right now, isn't she? He said quietly. Probably. Thursday night is her regular dinner with Richard. David was silent for a long time, processing everything I had shown him. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red and defeated. What do you want from me, Jessica? I want you to choose. Jail or buys. But either way, our marriage is over. And if you choose buys, then you had better hope Vanessa doesn't decide Richard is a better prospect than you are. Because when she abandons you in a foreign country, broke and with no way to get home, you will be completely alone. David was crying now. Silent tears. He didn't bother to wipe away. How did everything go so wrong? You made a series of choices, David. Bad choices. And now you have to live with the consequences. I stood up and walked toward the door. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Pack what you want to take, but don't touch any of our joint accounts. If you already moved the money. Where are you going? My sister's. When I come back tomorrow, I want you gone. If you choose jail, leave a note with your lawyer's name. If you choose buys, leave nothing. Jessica, wait. I turned back to look at him. One last time. I loved you, David. I really truly did. But the man I loved never existed, did he? He didn't answer, and I didn't wait for one. I drove to Cynthia's hotel and spent the night there going over my plan one last time. Everything had to happen in the exact order, or it would all fall apart. The next morning, exactly at 2 o'clock, I walked into the coffee shop on Elm Street. Richard Hawthorne was already there, sitting at a corner table, and looking uncomfortable. He was older than I expected, probably late 50s, with gray hair and expensive clothing that couldn't hide his punch. Mr. Hawthorne, I said. He looked up at me with a mixture of curiosity and annoyance. M.R.S. Miller, I presume. Thank you for coming. I sat down across from him and studied his face. He was handsome in the way successful older men often are, well-groomed, confident, getting what he wanted. Let's get this over with, he said. What do you want? I want to show you something. I slid a tablet across the table and pressed play on a video I had recorded the night before. It was David's phone, a conversation with Vanessa, the one where she had rejected his plea to move up their timeline. Richard's face went very still as he listened. Where did you get this? I recorded it last night while she was having dinner with you. That's impossible. Vanessa doesn't know your husband. I opened a folder and laid out copies of the bank records I had found in David's office. Your girlfriend has been taking money from my husband for over a year. He's been embezzling funds from his clients to finance her boutique and her lifestyle. Richard studied the documents, his expression darkening with each page. How much money? Close to $500,000. And that's just what I found so far. The thing is, it gets worse. They're planning to disappear together, flee the country, start new lives and buys. Richard looked up sharply. When? Originally next month, but David tried to move up the timeline yesterday. Vanessa told him she was too busy to see him because she was having dinner with a potential investor. She was with me. I know. Richard was silent for a long time, processing the implications. What do you want from me? I want to know how much money you've given her. He didn't answer immediately, and I could see him calculating whether it was worth lying to me. About $80,000, maybe $90,000. Over what period of time? 6 months. I did the math in my head. Between Richard and David, Vanessa had scammed close to $600,000 in the last year. She's good at this, I said. Apparently, the question is, what are we going to do about it? Richard leaned back in his chair. What did you have in mind? I think Vanessa Blake needs to learn what it feels like to be betrayed. I'm listening. I pulled out my phone, and showed him the draft email David had written to Vanessa about their escape plans. David thinks they're leaving together. Vanessa thinks she's playing both of you while she plans her exit strategy. But what if neither of those things were true? What do you mean? I mean, what if Vanessa found out that both of her income streams were about to dry up simultaneously? What if she panicked and made a mistake? One that exposed her to people who wouldn't be as understanding as we've been? Richard's eyes narrowed. What kind of people? The kind of people who don't like being stolen from. I explained my plan to Richard, and by the time I finished, he was smiling for the first time since we met. You are more twisted than I thought, Mrs. Miller. I prefer to think of it as being thorough. You haven't seen anything yet. We spent the next hour firming up the details. Richard would call Vanessa and tell her he was ready to leave his wife and wanted to take her away immediately. He would offer to double the money he had been giving her if she could disappear with him that weekend. Simultaneously, I would ensure David found out about Vanessa's relationship with Richard, not through me. David couldn't. No, I had orchestrated any of this, but through an anonymous tip that would lead him to catch them together. The goal was to create a situation where Vanessa was forced to choose between two angry, betrayed men, both of whom knew she had been lying to them. But that was just the first move. What about the money she's already stolen? Richard asked. That's where things get interesting. I explained the second part of my plan, and Richard's smile grew even wider. You're sure this will work? It will work. The question is, are you willing to carry it out? Richard thought about it for a moment, then nodded. She cost me $90,000 and made a fool of me. I want her to pay for that. She will. Trust me, she'll pay for everything. That night, I drove home and found David's car gone from the driveway. The house was eerily silent, and for a moment, I wondered if had chosen buys after all. But when I walked into the kitchen, I found a note on the table. Jessica, I chose jail. I called the police and confessed everything. I also called my lawyer, John Murray of Murray and Associates. I'm sorry for what I did to you, and I'm sorry for what I did to my clients. You deserved better than me, David. I sat at the kitchen table and read the note 3 more times. A part of me felt a flicker of respect for David's decision to turn himself in, but it was overwhelmed by anger at how long it had taken him to do the right thing. Local news carried the story that night. Local financial advisor arrested for embezzlement. David's mugshot flashed in the screen, and the reporter explained he had stolen nearly $500,000 from his clients over the course of a year. My phone immediately started ringing. Neighbors, friends, reporters wanting a statement from the betrayed wife. I turned off the phone and poured myself a glass of wine. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. David was out of the picture, which meant Vanessa Blake was about to lose her primary source of income. But I wasn't done with her yet. On Saturday morning, I called Vanessa's boutique. Blake's boutique. Vanessa speaking. How can I help you? Vanessa, this is Jessica Miller, David's wife. The silence on the other end of the line lasted for almost 30 seconds. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. I know about the affair, Vanessa. I know about the money and I know about your plans to leave the country together, Mrs. Miller. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding is yours. You thought you could steal from my husband and his clients without consequence. You thought you could destroy my marriage and disappear without anyone fighting back. I don't know what David told you, but David didn't tell me anything. I figured it out on my own. And now David is in jail, which means your main income stream has just dried up. Vanessa was silent for so long, I thought she might have hung up. What do you want? She finally asked. I want to meet you today at your boutique. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think you have a choice because if you don't meet him, my next call will be to Richard Hawthorne's wife. Another long silence. How do you know about Richard? I know everything, Vanessa. Or should I call you Valerie Smith? The sound she made was barely audible, halfway between a gasp and a sob. At 2, I repeated, don't keep me waiting. I hung up before she could respond. Exactly at 2, I walked into Blake's boutique. Vanessa was waiting behind the counter and she looked awful. Her normally perfect makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled, and her hands were shaking. Lock the store, I said. What? Put the close sign up and lock the door. We need privacy for this conversation. Vanessa did as I asked, her movements robotic and uncertain. When she turned back toward me, I could see she had been crying. Sit down, I said, pointing to a small seating area near the changing rooms. Vanessa perched on the edge of a chair as if she might bolt for the door at any moment. Let's start with the basics. I said, how long have you been sleeping with my husband? Mrs. Miller, I really don't think that's relevant. 8 months. And how long have you been taking money from him? I never ask for money. David offered to help with the business. How long, Vanessa? 6 months. And Richard Hawthorne. How long have you been seeing him? Vanessa's face crumpled. How do you know about Richard? I know everything. Your real name, your criminal record, the way you've been playing 2 men against each other while robbing them both blind. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. You're a scammer, Vanessa. You target successful men, make them fall in love with you, and then bleed them dry. The only difference this time is that one of your victims was stealing from innocent people to pay for your lifestyle. Vanessa was openly weeping now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. I didn't know David was embezzling. I swear I didn't, but you would have taken the money anyway. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen. I said. You are going to return every last penny you took from David and Richard. All of it. I don't have that kind of money. The boutique barely covers overhead. Then you had better figure out a way to get it, because if you don't, I will make sure that everyone knows exactly who Valerie Smith is. I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope and laid it on the table between us. Inside this envelope are copies of your criminal record, bank statements showing the money you received from David and Richard, photographs of you with both men, and recordings of conversations that prove you knew about David's embezzlement. Vanessa stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. I also have the contact information for Richard's wife, David's clients, the state attorney general's office, and several reporters who would be very interested in your story. What do you want from me? I want you to disappear, close the boutique, return the money, and get out of town. If I ever see you again, if you contact David or Richard or anyone else in this city, I will destroy you. I can't just disappear. I have a lease, employees, customers. You should have thought about that before you decided to become a felon. I stood up and walked toward the door. Then I turned back to look at her, one last time. You have 72 hours, Vanessa. After that, all bets are off. Wait, she called out behind me. Even if I wanted to return the money, I don't have it. The boutique has overhead and Richard's wife has been watching his bank accounts more closely. That sounds like a personal problem. I left her sitting there in her failing boutique, surrounded by expensive clothes she couldn't afford and dreams she had built on other people's money. But my revenge was far from over. On Sunday evening, my phone rang. It was Vanessa, and she sounded desperate. Jessica, please, I need more time. 72 hours isn't enough to liquidate everything. You had months to plan your exit strategy with David. I'm sure you can figure something out. I'll lose everything: the boutique, my apartment, my car. You mean you'll lose everything you bought with stolen money? How tragic. Please, there has to be no other way. Maybe we can agree to some kind of payment plan. The only plan I'm interested in is one where you disappear completely. I hung up and turned off my phone. I had no intention of giving Vanessa more time or negotiating with her, but I wanted her to spend the next few days in a state of panic, because while she was panicking, I was setting up the final stage of my revenge. On Monday morning, I drove to Richard Hawthorne's main dealership. The showroom was impressive. Rows of gleaming cars under bright lights, salespeople in suits ready to close the deals. I asked to speak to Mr. Hawthorne, and after a short wait, I was escorted to his office on the second floor. Jessica, he said, rising from behind a huge desk. How did then? GS go with Vanessa. As expected, she's terrified and desperate, which means she's about to make some very bad decisions. What kind of decisions? I sat down across from his desk and pulled out my phone, the kind that will give you exactly the leverage we need to end this. I showed Richard a series of text messages I had received from Vanessa over the last 24 hours. She had progressed from defiant to pleading to angry to desperate, running through every emotion as she realized the impossible position she was in. She's going to run, Richard said, reading them edges. Exactly. But she can't run without money, and she can't get money without taking bigger risks. What kind of risks? The kind that involve other people's credit cards, bank accounts, or jewelry. Valerie Smith is a convicted felon, Richard. When she is cornered, she will revert to what she knows best. Ickard leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. And when she does, we will be ready for her. I explained the final phase of my plan to Richard, and by the time I finished, he was laughing out loud. "You are absolutely ruthless," he said with admiration. I prefer to think of it as thorough. That afternoon, I made a call to Detective Lisa Thompson of the Phoenix Police Department. I had researched her background carefully. She specialized in financial crimes and had a reputation for being intelligent and persistent. "Detective Thompson, my name is Jessica Miller. My husband was the financial advisor arrested for embezzlement last week." "Yes, I recall the case. How can I help you, Mrs. Miller?" "I have information about someone who may have been involved in my husband's crimes. Someone who might be planning to commit additional crimes in the near future." "I'm listening." I gave Detective Thompson Vanessa's real name and criminal history along with carefully edited versions of the evidence I had collected. I made it clear that Vanessa had been taking money from David, but I did not mention Richard Hawthorne or my own investigation. "Well, look into it," Detective Thompson promised. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. One more thing. I have reason to believe Valerie Smith might try to flee in the next few days. If you plan to interview her, you might want to do it soon. We'll take that into advisement." On Tuesday morning, I drove past Blake's boutique and saw a closing sale sign in the window. Vanessa was liquidating everything, just as I expected. I parked across the street and watched for 2 hours as Vanessa moved frantically through the store, slashing prices and boxing up merchandise. She looked haggarded and defeated, like a woman who had finally run out of options. At noon, Richard Hawthorne's Mercedes pulled up outside the boutique. He got out and went inside, and I could see Vanessa's face light up with desperate hope through the window. They talked for about 20 minutes, and I could tell from their body language that it wasn't going well. Richard was calm and controlled while Vanessa was animated and pleading. When Richard left, Vanessa collapsed against the counter as if she might fall down. Phase 3 was underway. On Tuesday evening, my phone rang again. "Jessica, it's Vanessa. I need to talk to you. I thought I was clear on Sunday. You have 1 day left." "I talked to Richard today. He said you've been working together." I didn't answer. "He told me everything about your investigation, about the pictures you took, about your plan to destroy me, and I want to make a deal." "I'm not interested in deals, Vanessa. What if I told you there's more money?" Money neither David nor Richard knew about. Now she had my attention. "What kind of money?" I've been running other small scams, but they add up. I have about $200,000 I've been keeping as an emergency fund, where safety deposit boxes, offshore accounts, cash hidden in my apartment. I was saving it for situations exactly like this, and you're offering to give it to David's victims. I'm offering it to you in exchange for you calling off your investigation and letting me disappear quietly. I considered it for a moment. $200,000 would go a long way toward paying back David's clients, and it would mean Vanessa was leaving town completely broke, but it wouldn't be enough, not for what she had done. "New deal," I said. "Jessica, please, I'm being reasonable. You destroyed my marriage, helped my husband steal from innocent people, and have been running scams that have likely hurt dozens of other victims. $200,000 doesn't begin to cover that damage. Then what do you want?" "I want you to pay for your crimes, all of them." "What does that mean?" "It means you should probably get a good lawyer, Vanessa. You're going to need one." I hung up and immediately called Detective Thompson. "Detective, this is Jessica Miller. I have an update on Valerie Smith." "What kind of update?" "She just confessed to running multiple financial scams and is hiding money from her victims. I think you might want to speak with her before she leaves town. We were actually planning to visit her tomorrow morning." "Thank you for the tip, Mrs. Miller. You might want to check her apartment and any safety deposit boxes she might have access to. She mentioned having emergency funds hidden in various places. We'll look into it." On Wednesday morning, I positioned myself across the street from Vanessa's apartment building with a cup of coffee and a newspaper. Exactly at 9, 3 unmarked police cars pulled up to the curb. I watched as Detective Thompson and several other officers entered the building. 20 minutes later, they emerged with Valerie Smith in handcuffs. She looked small, or somehow diminished by the reality of her situation. As they put her in the back of the police car, she looked around desperately, and for a moment her eyes met mine across the street. I raised my coffee cup in a small salute. The expression on her face was everything I had hoped for. shock, betrayal, and the dawning realization that she had been outmaneuvered by someone she had underestimated. Thapala's cars pulled away and I sat there for a few more minutes savoring the moment. Valerie Smith was finally going to face justice for her crimes, and she was going to do it with nothing. No money, no allies, no way to scam her way out of the consequences. But I still had one more piece of business to finish. That afternoon, I met Richard Hawthorne last time at the same coffee shop, where we had first discussed our alliance. I saw the news about Vanessa's arrest, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. Financial fraud, identity theft, money laundering. They're throwing the book at her. She earned it. And the money she mentioned, the emergency fund. The police found most of it, $230,000 hidden in various accounts and safe deposit boxes. It will go toward restitution for her victims. Richard nodded approvingly, and David's clients thought they'll get most of their money back between Vanessa's stash and the assets David is turning over as part of his plea deal. It won't be everything, but it will be enough for most of them to recover. What do we get out of all this? I studied Richard's face carefully. He had been helpful during the investigation, and he had certainly been wronged by Vanessa, but I hadn't forgotten he was a married man who had been having an affair and financing his mistress with family money. You go back to your wife, who will never find out about Vanessa. I'd say that's worth $90,000. Wouldn't you agree? Richard's smile faltered slightly. And if I don't agree, then you would be making a very bad decision. Mrs. Hawthorne seems like a lovely woman, and she deserves better than a husband who cheats on her with convicted criminals. Richard was silent for a long moment. Then he chuckled and shook his head. You really are something else, Jessica Miller. I prefer to think of myself as thorough. We parted ways after that, and I never saw Richard Hawthorne again. A year later, I read in society pages that he and his wife had renewed their wedding vows at an expensive resort in Hawaii. Whether that meant he had learned his lesson or just gotten better at hiding his affairs, I neither knew nor cared. My business with him was over. 6 months after Vanessa's arrest, I was sitting in my lawyer's office finalizing my divorce from David. He was serving a 7-year sentence for embezzlement, and though he had written me several letters from jail, I had returned all of them unopened. The sale of the house should close next week, my lawyer said, sliding a stack of papers across his desk. After legal fees and restitution payments, you should net about $200,000 clean. Good. I want half of that to go into a trust fund for David's victims, the ones who didn't get their full restitution. The other half goes into my New Start Fund. New Start Fund. I smiled. I'm moving to Denver. New city, new job, new life. I figure after everything that's happened, he earned a clean slate. The lawyer nodded and made notes on his pad. And the letters from your husband. He's been quite persistent. Return them. I have nothing to say to David Miller. 3 weeks later, I was standing in the living room of my new apartment in Denver, looking out over the city skyline. It was a beautiful view, mountains in the distance, the South Platte River glittering in the evening sun. A world full of possibilities stretching out before me. My phone vibrated with a text message from Cynthia. Saw the news about Vanessa's sentencing. 12 years. You must relieved. I was relieved. Valerie Smith had been convicted on multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. The judge had been particularly harsh due to her previous convictions and the number of victims involved. But more than relieved, I felt vindicated. I had set out to make sure everyone who had wronged me faced the consequences of their actions, and I had succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. David was in prison, his reputation destroyed, and his financial advisor license permanently revoked. Vanessa was serving a long sentence in a federal prison, her scamming days finally over. Even Richard Hawthorne had paid a price, if not in legal consequences, then certainly in the fear and anxiety of knowing how close he had come to losing everything. I had given them all exactly what they deserved. As I unpacked the last of my boxes, I found a small framed photo that had been buried at the bottom of one of the containers. It was a picture of David and me on our wedding day, both smiling and looking impossibly young and happy. For a moment, I felt a flicker of sadness for the woman I had been so trusting, so naive, so completely unprepared for the betrayal that lay ahead. But that woman didn't exist anymore. Replaced by someone harder, smarter, more dangerous. Someone understood that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, and that justice sometimes had to be taken rather than waited for. I looked at the photo for a long moment, then dropped it into the trash can. The past was over. It wasted time to build a future. That night, I opened a bottle of wine and sat on my new balcony, watching the sunset over the Denver skyline. My phone rang and I checked the caller ID, expecting it to be Cynthia or one of my new coworkers. Instead, it was a number I didn't recognize. Hello, is this Jessica Miller? Who's asking? My name is Detective Sarah Owens, Denver Police Department. I'm calling because we have a case that I think might interest you. What kind of case? A financial fraud case. The suspect is a woman who has been targeting married men, gaining their trust, and then stealing from them. Her methods are sophisticated. I felt a familiar prickle of interest. What does this have to do with me? We understand you were instrumental in solving a similar case in your hometown. We could use someone with your particular skills and insight. I thought about it for a moment. I had planned to find a quiet job in Denver, maybe work for a nonprofit or start a small business, something peaceful and low-key. But the detective was right. Eno had particular skills I had developed out of necessity and honed through practice. Skills that might be useful in situations where justice needed a helping hand. Tell me more about the case, I said. As Detective Owens described the investigation, I found myself taking notes and asking questions. The suspect sounded familiar. Too familiar to be a coincidence. Detective, I said when she finished. What is the suspect's name? We're not entirely sure. She's been using multiple aliases, but one of the names she's been using is Vanessa Blake. I almost dropped the phone. Detective Owens, I said carefully. I think we need to meet in person, and I think I have information that might be very useful to your investigation. How soon can you be down at the precinct? I looked out at the city lights twinkling in the darkness, and for the first time in months, I felt really excited about the future. Give me 20 minutes. Some people, I had learned, never changed. They simply moved to new cities and found new victims. But they had made one crucial mistake in choosing Denver as their next hunting ground. They had moved to my city now. And I was very good at hunting hunters. As I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, I found myself smiling. My new life was about to get very interesting. After all, Vanessa Blake had taught me one valuable thing during our last encounter. Revenge wasn't just about settling scores. It was about ensuring the lesson was learned. And some lessons, I discovered, required multiple teaching sessions to truly sink in. I closed my apartment door behind me and stepped out into the Denver night, ready to begin my next chapter.